Welcome to the Atom Ventures podcast. My name is Bhairav Patel. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Atom Ventures. And today I'm here talking to Kuda Biza, a serial entrepreneur. Say hello, Kuda.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? Glad to be on this podcast and super excited on the talk we're going to have.
So, Kuda, you have a number of different projects on the go at the moment. You are involved in Unbelievable, Signables, This Is My Era. That's a lot of different projects. Before we get into those, can you talk a little bit about your background? So how did what was your journey to becoming an entrepreneur? Where did you start off? What's your background?
Yeah, so my journey to become an entrepreneur started on one hot summer day when I was in Harare, Zimbabwe. And I went to my mom, asking for money for an ice cream. And that morning, I'd been naughty. And she basically said no, as a way to, punish me or whatever. But I wasn't going to let my mother control my ice cream destiny at that point. So I took a bucket, some cleaning supplies, and headed over to my neighbor. And I pitched her to clean her windows because I had noticed that her windows were pretty dirty. So I don't know if it was because I was an amazing salesperson or she literally just felt pity or she admired the entrepreneurial drive. She said yes. And it took me 3 hours to clean the windows. And then after that, I earned $5. And then the next day when the ice cream truck rolled by, instead of me running into the house to ask my mom for $1, I ran into the house, went into my room, grabbed my wallet, and bought, my first ice cream from the money that I made through entrepreneurship that day. And it was a day that was super pivotal and a turning point in my life because I realized a couple of things. So one of the things I realized was that, entrepreneurship is liberating, right? I had solved someone's problem by, coming in and providing a service, and I had earned money. And now I was, somewhat independent, right? When it came to ice cream, right? I had figured out that, hey, if I wash 10, houses, windows, throughout the summer, I'm pretty much set. Like I won't have to depend on my mom. So that's how my entrepreneurial journey started pretty much.
So the first thing you bought with your first dollar was ice cream, which I think is amazing. So
yes,
it's excellent stuff. So that was obviously in Harare. When did you, because you're in the US right now, so when did you leave Harare to go to the US? And what made you leave?
Yeah, so a couple of things made me want to leave. So fast forward a year from when I had done this whole ice cream adventure, I was going to school. When I was growing up in Zimbabwe, I used to walk 2 miles to school with, me and my sister. And I would always notice a group of kids at this house that were always outside playing and not going to school like us. So I was always curious because these kids were like my age, right? So I'm like, hey, how come they're not going to school like I am? So one day I decided to stop by and go to their house. And as I was talking to the kids there, I realized that they weren't going to school because their parents had passed away. So they were living with their grandmother. And public school in Zimbabwe is not free. So if you're not paying, if you don't have money to pay, you're not going to school. So basically that was their situation. So it kind of like got me thinking that, hey, if the government cannot help out, kids that are in this situation where they're orphans and, they really don't have anybody who can support them, within their family because their grandmother wasn't working. All she could do was farm and garden and feed them and provide them shelter. So if the government is not providing support or the society, right, local residents, then I probably need to leave Zimbabwe, go to America or the UK or whatever, make something of myself, become a successful entrepreneur, and then use those resources to then help, kids like, Sarah and her siblings. So that's when really the seed was planted. And then when I was in high school, when I would always tell my friends like, hey guys, after this, I'm going to the US, everybody would look at me crazy because I came from a lower middle class family. My parents, couldn't afford it, right? And within kind of like my peer group, they were in the same situation. So they were all scratching their heads saying like, dude, like, look at us. Like people like us don't go to America. It doesn't happen to us. but I just had this drive that I was going to figure it out. So after high school, I decided to work at an internet cafe. And the reason why I decided to work at an internet cafe was because I wanted to have free internet, right? I wanted to have access to free internet because I had done the math and I realized that, hey, the only way I can go to America is by applying for as many scholarships as possible, right? It's a numbers game. And I didn't have the money to be paying for internet because I didn't have a computer or internet at the house. So by working at an internet cafe, I was able to then get free internet access. And literally, I would just spend the entire night because I worked the night shift. So we would close at 11, and I would literally sleep in the internet cafe, like from 11 till 6 in the morning, just applying for scholarship after scholarship. You know, like I applied for hundreds of scholarships. It was a 2-month journey. Sorry, not 2 month, 2-year journey. It was a 2-year journey. Until I finally got accepted at Lynn University in Boca Raton, Florida. And they gave me a 50% scholarship. So they didn't give me a full scholarship, but it was a really good start. And then someone who had really seen my journey over the 2 years, how much sacrifice I had put in, because I turned down an opportunity to go to university in Zimbabwe because I was just resolute, that much resolution in my heart that, hey, I'm going to America, it's all or nothing. That I turned it down. And so they had seen this. And, when I had gotten the 50%, they went out and they took a loan. Think about it. Someone went to take a loan to pay for my freshman year at an American university. And that's how I came to America.
Do you mind asking, like, when was this all?
Yeah. So I finished high school in 2003. And then in 2005, that's when, I managed to get the 50% scholarship at Lynn University. And then the lady went out and took out a loan to pay for my tuition. So it's been 15 years now since that happened.
I mean, for me, it's quite fascinating for a couple of things here. I mean, obviously, it's great that someone had that belief in you. But if you taking a little bit of a step out and step back and out of the traditional kind of podcast questions, when you're here in the UK, I mean, I was traveling a bit, but when you're in the UK, you kind of have that view of Zimbabwe being very poor, very chaotic. And it doesn't seem that your story would actually transpire, right? It doesn't seem that kind of thing could happen in Zimbabwe the way that we hear about Zimbabwe over here. So I guess the question is, I mean, the picture you're painting is there are a lot of problems, but then there are also opportunities if you can create them.
Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to mindset and your willingness to act, right? I know quite a few people who are also in my shoes who wanted to come to America, but didn't have the mindset or the belief or weren't willing to take the action that I took to do it. And I know people who are in worse off situations than I was that made it too. So nothing is guaranteed in life, but I think the thought process is, how willing are you to do whatever it takes until you become successful? You hear of people like, let's say, Sylvester Stallone, the actor, he's a multi-millionaire now. You can see what he's been able to do with his franchise for Rocky and, all these different things. But he was poor. He was poor to the fact, to the point where he sold his dog, right? In order for him to have money to eat, because he had gotten to that point where it was rock bottom. But it was in that time where, he, at that point of desperation, where he then watched a boxing match. It inspired him to write the script for Rocky, and look at what happened, right? So the statement I like to say is that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So it is true that in third world countries like Zimbabwe and, other regions, not just Africa, but Asia, Latin America, we might not have the same opportunities as someone in New York City or LA might have, right? Just because we're not near Wall Street or not near Hollywood or whatever, but there are talented people out there. So especially now in this day and age where you have the internet, I think you have the ability to find ways to showcase your talent so that the people who are out there seeking that talent can then help you gain access to those opportunities. So in my case, if I hadn't taken the time to go on the internet, apply for scholarship after scholarship after scholarship, with all the talent that I had, and if I hadn't showcased it to where the opportunities were, things wouldn't have happened. So yes, there are struggles in Africa, there are struggles everywhere, but I feel like it all comes down to you, right? Are you willing to do whatever it takes for you to succeed?
So what's interesting, what I find quite interesting here is that, 2005, you wouldn't necessarily have had as many opportunities to showcase. I mean, 2005, things like Instagram didn't exist, WhatsApp didn't exist, right? So you didn't have, you had, I can't even remember Facebook, but it would all been quite fledgling. It'd been more like my Friends United and MySpace, etc. So in a weird way, we have probably more opportunities to show your talent, but actually the global, like the global outset, the global kind of mindset that is there now is that actually immigration is harder, right? Because people are shutting down borders. People are, and not just because of COVID, but the UK is trying to control immigration. The US has been trying to do it. So it's kind of in a weirdly way, it was harder for you to gain that exposure, but maybe easier to get into the country. And now it's harder to get in the country, but easier to get the exposure. Do you think that
it's a case by case too, because I think there's some countries that also do have, policies that are quite open and flexible. So I'm not an expert in that, but what I do know though is that you look into, let's say, the EU or like Canada, next door neighbor to America, their immigration policy is more welcoming, right? So if you're in Zimbabwe, it doesn't really make that big of a difference if you land in Toronto than you land in New York, right? You've gone to a place where you have more opportunities and more access to things. So because now, with access to internet and whatnot, you have the ability to find out that information. But sometimes even those hard places, you can still make it. Don't be afraid with what you see in the news. I think there's a quote that I love, which is, you miss 100% of the shots you never take. I would encourage you to just take the shot. And although the borders are closing and whatnot, maybe you are that just one person that they let in, right? But you won't know if you don't take the shot.
Sure. Do you think, moving almost 15 years on, right? So do you think, do you need to move outside of Africa to get the same kind of shot? Could you do this in somewhere like Nigeria or South Africa? Do you think your journey would have been the same?
Yes. From kind of like an entrepreneurial perspective, yes, I think that's where actually the opportunities are, right? In a lot of those markets, because again, it's all about mindset, right? Part of the education system back in Africa, from my perspective, is they teach you to be a good manager, right? They don't teach you to create, because if you think about countries like Zimbabwe, where it was, colonial rule for a long time, they weren't teaching people like me, like Black Zimbabweans, this is how you start a business, blah, blah, blah. They teach you like, hey, you go to school and you learn how to be a good manager, get a good job, buy a house. That's the narrative they teach you. But now, because of access to information and, you have a lot of content out there promoting, entrepreneurship like Shark Tank and things like that, there's a new breed of entrepreneurs that's coming up. And the thing about entrepreneurship, the way I define it is, as an entrepreneur, you're just solving problems, right? So remember the story I told you about washing windows. I was simply solving a problem and I got rewarded for it. So if you're in Africa or Asia or Latin America, or even in the UK or anywhere, for you to be an entrepreneur and to have guaranteed success, just solve a need. The moment you solve a need, that's it. And you can be successful anyway. So just having that mindset where you're looking for consumer needs that are big enough to turn into a big business, that's really the key to entrepreneurship, in my opinion.
So
regardless of location.
Yes, and I completely agree. I think so. We talked before the podcast started about some that you have investments in, and you have a kind of a finger still in various parts of Africa. You're still involved in the entrepreneur network and still investing. What do you see out there? What is exciting you out there? Like, what are you investing in, and what do you feel that is coming out there that you can say, hey, this holds a candle to anything else around the world?
Yeah, so a little bit of info that I've read is that in 2018, for example, um, African startups raised about $725 million US dollars across, I think, maybe 460 deals, right? That was 2 years ago. So deals are happening, right? People are investing money. And some of it, it's local, like, there are a lot of African business people who have the resources, and some of it, it's international. Mark Zuckerberg's fund invested in a company called Andela in Nigeria, and a few other startups across the continent. So what I'm seeing, whether there's a lot of action, is the tech space, right? So fintech, for example, because the banking systems in Africa are not as efficient as over here. You're seeing a lot of disruption within that space, or some other financial services. So some of the businesses that I've invested in are in the financial tech space. So I'll give you one example. So there's a company that I just recently invested in. It's probably like 4 weeks old, and they're in the financial tech. And the way they're disrupting it is that a lot of the African countries, think of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Ghana, like pretty much every African country, they don't really have a credit scoring system. So if someone, has a good job and they are tired of renting and they want to buy a house, because there's no real credit score, usually banks want collateral. But if you don't have collateral and you're trying to acquire the collateral, where are you going to have the collateral to acquire the collateral, right? So in America or in the UK, that's where the credit scoring system helps, right? Because they can take a look into your credit history and see like, oh, you pay your bills in time and things like that. And then they're able to lend you credit, and then you go buy a house. So the business that I invested in is called Noto Africa, so Notto. And basically their concept is using your payment of rentals to be a way to build your credit history, so that when you're now ready to go buy a house, the banks have access to this information to see like, oh, wow, you've been renting for 10 years. You've never missed a date, meaning that, you can manage your finances and you have good cash flow. So now they can use that information to score you and lend you credit so that you can buy a house. And usually a mortgage sometimes is actually cheaper than rent, depending on the market. So you're now able to then go buy a house and start building collateral through that. So that's where I am seeing a lot of the action, really. It's in financial technology, but there's also e-commerce, agriculture, healthcare, so many industries, but fintech is where I'm seeing the most activities in Africa.
Yeah, I think the world is your oyster out there, right? I think any kind of vertical or sector is ripe for disruption out there. And there's obviously, and I've been talking to people out in places like Rwanda and Tanzania, Uganda. There's a lot of really innovative stuff happening, and people solving local problems, right? Really solving local problems. One of the questions I've got for you though is around, so are there any barriers really when it comes into starting a business in any country in Africa? Is corruption still an issue, or can the disruptors truly be disruptive, or do they still have to be beholden to things that are going on in the background?
I haven't lived in Africa for 15 years, so I can't give you accurate information around that. But when it comes to things like corruption and whatnot, but I read the same newspapers you read. I don't know if the corruption in Africa is worse or better than the West, because I still think corruption is everywhere.
Yeah.
But I do believe that some of the barriers that I would say, may really warrant for us to address are infrastructural, right? Not having fast enough internet, or internet not really being broadly distributed, or not a lot of people having access to it. I think those are the focus. Those are the areas that I would probably focus on as areas and challenges within Africa. I'm not saying there's no corruption or things like that, but like I said, I haven't lived there for 15 years. I haven't experienced it. I haven't started a business in Africa. So I can't speak, with high level of confidence as to, the pros and cons of, corruption and things like that in Africa.
No, I agree. And I think corruption is everywhere. It's just in different forms, right? It just it may not be as explicit as it is in somewhere like India, for example. I think one of the things that I've seen working with some companies in South Africa is just simple stuff like electricity, right? Load shedding, not having power for 12 hours a day. That's something that will kill your business quite quickly if it's online.
And that's what I was saying, like infrastructural, right? Yeah. Like there are things like that. Exactly. Like it's hard for you to run a business when half of the day you don't have electricity.
So just going back to the lady that sponsored you to go to university in the US, were there any strings attached to that? Or was that something where she said, go make something of yourself?
Strings attached into like I have to give her back money or anything?
Yeah, like just to pay back the money.
No, it was a gift.
Wow.
But I've found my own ways to pay her back.
Sure. Well, and obviously you've done very well because, are a serial entrepreneur yourself. So when you got out to Florida, what did how was it a massive culture shock for you?
Well, I grew up watching a lot of the Western content, right? So, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, MTV, a lot of these, American-based movies or talk shows and series. So I was kind of like quite familiar with the lingo and the lifestyle, right? But I would say probably the biggest shock for me was around how kids would talk to their parents. In Africa, there's a huge level of respect to, your elders. It doesn't just necessarily mean it's, your parents. It just could be anybody like in the street. Like if you get on a bus and I'm young and an older or, an elder man or woman comes in, you stand up, right? And you offer them the seat. Over here, it'll be just like it's whatever, I wouldn't really see a lot of that happening. Another culture shock was like kind of like engagement with girls, right? In Zimbabwe, there was kind of like a different way to court. It was a little bit longer and whatever. But in college in the US, things move quickly. It's fast. And, it's people want to have fun. And it was a little bit different in that regard. Because, I went to school in Florida, right? And, Miami were like, it's like about 40 minutes away from my school. So there was a lot of that South Beach type of lifestyle as well, which Zimbabwe is landlocked. We don't have a beach or an ocean or anything like that. So now, just walking around and people are dressed in bikinis, it took a little bit of time to get used to, but it's obviously it's a good experience. I'm used to it now, right? But, that was probably the culture shock there. But I think the biggest thing for me was really not having my family around, right? So I came as a teenager. I was about 17 years old, and I came by myself with $40 in my pocket. That's all I had. So, it kind of like becomes real, right? When back home you have, family, friends, relatives, that whole support system. And now it's like, okay, you're here, you're going to have to figure it out on your own. And for me, that was probably the biggest shock in terms of, moving to the US, because now you're like 10, 20,000 miles away, and you now have to man up, right? It's showtime now. It's like the Super Bowl.
Yeah, for sure. And those are your formative years, right? Those are the years that you become yourself. And it's very important that obviously the journey that you've gone on is very different for the people around you as well. So I'd assume that there weren't many people that could understand your story.
Well, yes and no. I went to a very international school. So Lynn University has about 25 to 30% of their student body being international, which was really cool because, I met people from countries that I didn't even know existed, right? So, you'd be in class and there'll be people from Saudi Arabia, there'll be people from Kazakhstan, Poland, England, Brazil. So the cool thing is that you then quickly become open-minded and you become a global citizen, right? I was speaking Turkish by my, junior year, right? Because I was just surrounded by, people from Turkey. I also learned Arabic. I actually started a business in Saudi Arabia, believe it or not. So, it helped because everybody came from different backgrounds. There was kind of like a solid international body. And then also there was also a good population, about 70% to 75% of the students were American. So then it was a good blend. So for me, I think it wasn't kind of like I was just dropped into this whole sea and I'm just by myself. I had like other international students around me who are going through the same thing as I was. So we're able to then figure it all out together.
And I guess the great thing now is that you have a place to stay whenever you want to travel around the world, right?
That is true.
Okay, so let's talk about your journey into your first business. So obviously, the entrepreneurial spirit never left you. You finished university. What did you do?
So I actually started a business when I was still in university. So I when I was a senior, I created a clothing line called the AFR Clothing. The business is still active now, but I'm no longer in kind of like the day-to-day. And it was, the thesis was creating a social enterprise, right? That would make a difference. So for every t-shirt that would sell, we would donate 20% to help educate kids in Zimbabwe. Because of the experience I had experienced when I was 10, that I mentioned earlier about those kids. So, build that business. By the time I left, we had, sent more than 100 students to school. So that was quite amazing. But when I graduated, I was kind of like at a crossroads because I went to school and I double majored in aviation and business. So I could have gone and worked for an airline, if I wanted to, let's say, become a pilot or work in kind of like the aviation management piece, I could have done that. But I also had, international business as my other major, so I could really just go into corporate America. So when I graduated, I had two options, one with an airline and one with a big Fortune 500 company. And I decided to go with the Fortune 500 company. And the opportunity that I was presented with was amazing. And the Fortune 500 company had just started an innovation team. And basically this team's role was to literally just create new businesses. So not new products or new adjacent businesses, like literally to take ideas from a napkin, build a business plan around it, get money from the CEO and the senior leadership and create a business from scratch. So, for me, it was kind of like the dream job, right? Because you're an entrepreneur in this big Fortune 500 company. So one of the businesses I created in that environment was a meal delivery system. So one of the brands that this company owned is a brand called Crock-Pot. It's a slow cooker that you use in your kitchen. I think it's in the UK, but it's quite prominent here in the US. And my thesis was, hey, we are not part of the experience when someone is using their slow cooker to make a meal. So why don't we create a line of, slow cooker meals that are already pre-configured, right? A line of frozen meals. So we'll put all the ingredients, all the sauces and whatnot. And all that a mom or a dad will have to do is take that frozen meal out of the fridge, put it in the slow cooker, add water, and they're out. The problem we were solving there was convenience, because a slow cooker, it cooks a meal over about 6 to 8 hours. But the prep time, right, in the morning, if you're making dinner, it takes you like 30, 45 minutes to prep. And if you're a working mom, that's a time where you're busy. You don't have 30 or 45 minutes to, eat breakfast, get ready, go to work, take the kids, and then make a slow cooked meal. So we solved convenience. So we launched this business, and in less than 3 years, we scaled it to more than $20 million in annual revenue. And I was leading this project. So that was kind of like another taste of entrepreneurship that I had when I was working in this big Fortune 500 company. And then left that opportunity and stayed with the same company, but then ran some of our e-commerce businesses. I was running about a $75 million e-com division after that. So it was also a really good experience because Amazon at that time was really starting to pick up, and I was able to really learn and understand Amazon and really build brands on Amazon and other, e-commerce platforms like our own websites or retailer websites as well. And then that led to the opportunity with Nonbelievable. So that was really kind of like the journey there.
So how long since you left Zimbabwe did it take you to get into the Fortune 500 company? How quick was that journey?
Well, it was straight out of college. So in America, it's a 4-year degree. So I actually got hired while I was still in school, because, like I said, I had started a business when I was in college. So as they were recruiting and they found out about me, and plus, I graduated top of my class. So, that also helped because when they were looking at my grades, I had the best grades in the entire school. I graduated as the valedictorian. So I gave the class speech and whatnot. So anyway, so it took 4 years between, when I left Zimbabwe to landing this job. So I literally didn't have a summer off. I just graduated, let's say on Saturday. Monday, I was in the office starting my job.
So that's a very quick journey, right? So within 4 years, you're going from Zimbabwe, landing on the shores of the US, and then within 4 years, you're already innovating within a Fortune 500 company. So, which is amazing, and it's an amazing story. So, my question to you around the innovation within the Fortune 500 company, having started businesses outside of that realm and outside of that sphere, what did starting a business within a Fortune 500 company give you? What did you learn from that experience as opposed to starting businesses outside of that kind of bubble, I guess?
Well, it's difficult. That's one thing I'll tell you, because, there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy, and, if you're a publicly traded company, there's certain things you can and cannot do. But what it did teach me, it taught me how multi-billion-dollar businesses operate. You just don't become a multi-billion-dollar business without discipline, without systems, without controls, without processes. So I was able to see what your startup will need to, transform into if you're gonna be building it for the long haul, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur, it's a certain skill set, it's a certain muscle. You can grow your business to become $1 million business. You can grow it to even 10 million. But once you start getting to that level, you now need a different type of skill set to take it to 100 million, and from 100 million to 1 billion. So for me, I kind of had the best of both worlds, because I was seeing what a multi-billion-dollar entity operates, like what are the systems and controls and structure that they have. But I also was kind of in the startup space where I'm starting from scratch. I have to be scrappy, I have to be nimble and all that good stuff. So now as I'm doing my own stuff, now having left the Fortune 500 company, I basically have that visibility and insight to know okay, once I get to this part of the journey, these are some of the things that we will need to start shifting to start preparing our company either for an acquisition or for that significant, jump to take it from, 10, 15, 20 million to, 100, $1 billion entity.
I think you touched on a very interesting point, because when we work with startups, one of the things that we emphasize are the processes and what processes they have in place, because everyone comes to us with a vision, a great vision of what they want to do, but not necessarily a vision on how to execute and how to operate. And that's really where you end up falling down, right? I mean, if you have you can have a great idea, but if you can't execute and operate on that idea, then it'll go nowhere.
That is true.
So go on, sorry.
No. So I was just going to say, so for me, that was kind of the big advantage is that, I kind of saw the best of both worlds, right? So it's really helped me be unique and well-rounded in that regard.
So you have a number of irons in the fire at the moment. There's Unbelievable, there's Signables, there's This Is My Era. Where are you spending most of your time at the moment? And, what is your passion project, I guess? Or I guess they all are your passion project, but, where are you spending your time? And talk a little bit through the different things that you're doing.
So I spend the majority of my time on Unbelievable. So Unbelievable, it's a mission-based cookie company. So we donate a meal for every cookie that we sell. So it's 1 for 1. And we're backed by Tony Robbins, Idea Lab New York, and Loeb NYC. So some very influential entities and people are involved. And, for me, I really loved Unbelievable because, the hunger issue is quite big in America. More than 40 million people struggle with hunger in America. That's more than the population of Canada. So there are more people struggling with hunger in America than there are people in Canada. And everybody loves cookies. So we're kind of like solving hunger in a delicious way. So my role there is I'm the co-founder and chief marketing officer. So I'm really focused on driving our brand awareness. We launched last October, so we're less than a year old at this point. But we've gained so much traction that we're already, way past a multi-million-dollar run rate. My role is really overseeing the marketing team and just making sure we drive demands for our products and we build, our brand in the marketplace without losing our essence of being a mission-based company.
I see some themes with ice cream and cookies here.
Yeah. There's a whole dessert theme to my entrepreneurship.
Excellent. So talk about Signables, and this is my era. What are you doing there?
So Signables, this was really just by accident. So I used to live in Florida, obviously, when I was with the big Fortune 500 company, and they actually moved me to the New York area because of some organizational shifts that had happened, and I was being promoted. So when I moved to New York, I started reaching out to some of my college friends, and one of them, Lauren Checky, her dad is a serial inventor. He's responsible for inventing the IVF for embryo, like childbirth. The dad invented the IVF stuff. And he had this invention around sports collectibles that they had, and it was just on the shelf collecting dust. So when I met with her for dinner, when I'd moved to New York and we're just catching up, she was telling me about it. And I'm a big soccer fan. I'm probably the biggest Chelsea supporter you'll find, big Didier Drogba fan and whatnot. So she was telling me about this project, and I was like, hey, can I see, do you guys have a prototype? And she was like, yeah, we have a prototype. So we literally left dinner. We went to our apartment. She shows me the prototype. And because of my experience in that big Fortune 500, I had a lot of experience with licensing. The whole concept of, going to license someone's brand and using their brand equity, whatever. So I told them, hey, we can license this. And I had been part of some licensing deals when I was at this big Fortune 500 company. So I had connections within the licensing space. So we basically were like, okay, let's see how it goes. Let's go talk to some of the sports franchises and see if they'll be interested. And if they're interested, then great, we can turn this into a business. So we didn't come up with a business plan or anything yet. We just wanted to go find out interest. So we went and we met with the representatives for Paris Saint-Germain, and they were like, yeah, we think this is a concept that has legs. And we signed a deal with PSG. And then we met with Chelsea, we met with Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, and a whole host of other clubs. And everybody loved the concept and they thought that, hey, it works. So once we had gotten, interest and permission from the clubs, we did some focus groups with some customers and we got a lot of positive responses. And we knew that, hey, we have a heartbeat here. And then we just created the business and we launched it. So we launched Signables January of this year. January 2020, and was seeing a lot of traction. When I went to Stamford Bridge in the mega store and I saw our product in shelf, customers actually buying it, I almost cried. The same is true at the Arsenal Emirates Stadium. We sell our Signables there. So it's been a fun project, and for me as a soccer fan, it's great to be giving other soccer fans a lot of pleasure through the product that we've created. And then this is
my busy year, right?
Yeah. There's never a dull moment. And then this is my era was really another just accident. So I was asked to give a speech at a youth conference. And as I was thinking about the title for the speech, I decided to title the speech, This Is My Era, after a song that my friend Alexander Starr, who's an Emmy-nominated musician, had created a song around that. So I wrote the speech, we did a whole performance around it. Alexander Starr then launched his song, and that presentation just received a lot of interest from a lot of people. So we started getting interest from the United Nations, from Harvard University, a whole host of schools. And we went to 40 institutions and events in 4 countries just doing the same presentation. And at every event, people would come to me and say like, hey, Kuda, I want to make it my era, but I don't know how. So regardless, it was a high school in Canada or a middle school in the UK or Harvard University where you have these Ivy League students, like clockwork, at the end of the presentation, that question would come up. So the entrepreneur in me was like, light bulb moment, why don't we create products that help people make it their era? So the first product we created was a 90-day planner. So you get to write your goals and then start planning your time and activities around how you're going to achieve these, top, 5 or 10 goals that you've set for yourself over the next 90 days. And then as we've been socially listening to our customers through our Facebook groups and other social media platforms, we quickly learned that customers wanted more. And one of the things that they wanted were guides who could teach them, things around, very various areas of life. So think about fitness, for example, having a fitness coach who can really just help you with working out and whatnot. And especially now where like with COVID, a lot of gyms that have been closed, a lot of these things have become virtual. Or like, let's say a financial guide who can teach you how to, manage your money, stay out of debt and things like that. So we decided to then create an online academy where we bring in subject matter experts who then, teach you certain things around different areas, because you want to make sure that your wheel of life is well balanced. So instead of just focusing on just your career, you want to focus on everything. You want to focus on your finances, your health, your fitness, your relationships, and things like that. So those are the offerings that we will have on the Academy. Right now, we have one course. We're currently onboarding a few others. So hopefully before the end of the year, we'll have maybe 4 to 5 courses on This Is My Era.
So how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about that?
Sure. The easiest way to get in touch with me is by sending me an email at Kuda, so Kuda, at kudabiza.com, which is kudabiza.com. So Kuda at kudabiza.com. The other way you could get in touch with me is just following me on Instagram. For the longest time, I had been very resistant on being on social media. So finally, when I launched my book, The Spear Method, I was like, you know what, I think it's time for me to have a social handle. So on Instagram, it's just at Kuda Biza, so Kudabiza.
So you mentioned your book, and actually that was one of the things I wanted to touch on. I know we've been going for quite a while now, but I think it's important to talk about that. So talk a little bit about the Spear Method. What are you saying to people there?
Yeah, so the Spear Method, I really created this book so that people can really think about how to have both success and fulfillment. They might feel like it's the same thing, but they're actually different, right? Success is more external and fulfillment is more internal. But what ends up happening is that a lot of people, I myself included, you're just focused on success, right? Oh, I want to get this promotion. I want to, make $1 million. I want to buy this house and so forth and so forth. But you forget to really then ask yourself questions like, hey, am I fulfilled? What really brings me happiness? So, success is more of a science, and then fulfillment is more of an art. So in the book, I have outlined 5 steps, so to enable you to find balance both in achieving success and also attaining fulfillment. And the SPEAR method is actually an acronym. So the word SPEAR, it's an acronym for S, it's seek your purpose. Yeah, you want to know your why. Why were you born? Why are you on earth? What makes you happy? So you want to really ask yourself those questions. So in that section of the book, I have, a set of questions and some sort of like an exercise that you can go through to help you find your purpose if you don't know what your purpose is. And then the next one, P, plan, is really to then start really coming up with a plan, right, around how am I gonna achieve my purpose now that I've found it. So as we know, failing to plan is planning to fail. You wanna make sure that every day you're planning, right? It doesn't have to be like, super crazy, but at least you're thinking about, hey, are the things that I'm spending my time on, leading to success and fulfillment. And then obviously once you plan, you want to execute, right? One of the quotes I like to say is that the 3 most important days in life are the day you are born, the day you find out why, and each day you act on your why. Because if you know your why, but you don't act on it, what good does it have, right? So you want to just make sure that every single day before you go to bed, you ask yourself your question like, hey, what action did I do on my why today? Because over time, that compounded action will be what will lead you to the next one, which is achieve, right? You will then achieve some sort of result. But what I always like to emphasize and tell people is that, hey, you should always be pushing yourself to step outside of your comfort zone, because that's where success and fulfillment lie, right? If your definition of success is building a billion-dollar company, you're not just going to do that when you're in your comfort zone. You're going to need to step out of it to do things that you've never done before in order to do it. And that's the first and most important achievement. And obviously, you want to achieve all the other goals, but I think just having that mindset of being comfortable with with being outside of a comfort zone is super important. And then the last one, which is R, is repeat. And it's basically just repeat this whole process of planning and executing over time in order for you to achieve success. So that's what the SPEAR method is all about. I hope people go out there and grab it. You can buy the ebook, you can buy the physical book. I'm more of a physical book person, but there's a lot of stories in there from a lot of successful people, billionaires, millionaires, a lot of them self-made, that you can learn from. So it's not just my stories or just my personal experience, but I really took the time to interview a lot of people, because I would always, wonder, right? Think about this. What are the odds of you winning, let's say, a basketball ring, to say like, oh, you've won the NBA championship? What are the odds?
Yeah, they're tiny.
They're very, very tiny. It's like 0.03%, right? So to find someone like, let's say, LeBron, or let's say not even LeBron. Let's take a guy like James Jones. He's not well known like LeBron, but he's won the NBA title 3 times. He grew up poor in inner city projects in Miami, very rough area. For him to go from where he was to winning the NBA 3 times, what did he have to do, right? So there's stories in there like that, because I actually got to interview James Jones, and he got to share with me what he was able to do to achieve success, but more importantly, to achieve fulfillment, because he's now using his success to give back and make a difference, and that's what brings fulfillment to him. So yeah, I highly encourage anybody to check it out, because it's a book for self-improvement and personal development. And it took me quite some time to really put it together. So I'm excited that it's out now.
So just before we ask you the last question, I just want to touch on the SPEAR method on the why bit. So when you say finding out your why, what exactly do you mean there? I mean, give an example of the why.
So let's say what's your purpose in life, right? For me, for example, to give you an example, like my purpose is to build profitable companies that solve the world's biggest problems. So if you see, like, there's now a theme around the businesses that I create. They are, for-purpose businesses. So it's a for-profit business, but with a social mission. So, for example, the t-shirt company that I started when I was in college, we're selling t-shirts, and we were donating part of the profits to educate people. So that's my purpose in life. That's my why, is to be a successful business person, because the more success I get, the more I'll be able to be fulfilled, because I get fulfillment from changing other people's lives, from making a difference. So once I had clarity on that, hey, this is my purpose in life, I was now able to just double down on it, because I know that if I'm, pursuing my purpose and following my dream, I will achieve success and happiness. Because I'm happy when I see like, oh, this year we made X millions of dollars in profit, and we're able to change, X, hundreds of thousands of lives. I find happiness. But that's me. What does that mean for you, right? What's your purpose? What's your why? So that's a question I'm asking you. Like, do you know your why yet, or you're still like looking for it? Just curious to know.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff. So I think, we've run a little bit over time, but there's been a lot to talk about. And to be honest, I think we could probably do another 2 or 3 podcasts on all of this. But let me finish with asking you the final question I ask everyone. If you could go back in time 20 years and give advice to your younger self, what would that advice be?
Dream big.
So you weren't dreaming big when you decided from, being in Zimbabwe that you wanted to go to university in the US. I mean, that's a pretty big dream. Well, and then from university,
it's a pretty big dream. But I could have applied to Harvard, right? I didn't, right? There were other opportunities where, like, even when I was in college, I could have done, or taken more risks, right? So from my perspective, I think dreaming big is the thing. Don't be afraid to say like, oh, it's not for me, or oh, this is impossible. Impossible is an illusion of your comfort zone. I'll just drop the mic right there.
Actually, I do want to ask you one more thing, actually, because to touch on what you mentioned, because you mentioned take more risks, but given your success so far, what would additional risk taking have meant? What would that have achieved?
If we're trying to be specific, I can look for a specific example.
Right. No, I mean, I don't need to go into.
Is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for like a specific example?
No. I was just thinking in general, right? So because when you say that, take more risks, it kind of implies that, there were things that you could have done that you weren't sure about.
So I'll give you an example. So when I started Airfile Clothing, with $150. That's all the money I had. And dreaming big, I could have gone out and raised capital, right? Because if I had raised capital, I would have had more money to launch with, and we would have probably accelerated our path to success. Because when you start small, it takes time, and time is the most important resource, right? So now you're spending a long time just trying to build something, because for me, it was really, I was scared to go raise capital. Like, I was telling myself a narrative in my mind to say, like, who am I to try to raise money? Like, so self-talk is super important. And I could only dream to the point where, like, my dream when I started Airfile Clothing was like, if I could sell just in my school, right? And my school was small, it's 2,000 students. So that's how big my dream was. If I, that was kind of like my dream. Like, hey, if I just sell to 2,000 people, I'm a success. But I could have said like, hey, I want to sell in entire South Florida. I want to take over this market, right? And because when the goal setting is super important, right? Like, dreams are super important because it puts in there, it will frame up the amount of effort you have to put into something. Right. And for example, the people who are my peers who were like, okay, my dream is just to go to university in Zimbabwe. They weren't doing the things that I was doing. They were not sleeping in an internet cafe, writing scholarship after scholarship. Not saying that they cannot do it, but because their dream wasn't as big as mine, they were only putting in effort that was the size of their dream. Right. And, it could be right for them. Maybe it's in alignment with their purpose. But since the question was to my younger self, I would tell him, dream bigger. Because now that I know my purpose, which is I want to impact as many lives as possible, the bigger dream that I have, the more lives that I can impact. So that's kind of like the context of that advice, to say like, hey, dream big. Because now I have super clarity on my why and my purpose. So, the bigger the dream it is, the more people I get to make a difference, too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. I think that you're only as, the only thing that limits you is your imagination, right? Ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, Kuda, it's been great talking to you. I think, like I said, we could definitely do this again when you have more time. But I don't know. Between now and the next time I see you, you will have probably started 5 more businesses, right? So,
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely keep in touch. So, thanks for that. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to listening to the episode.
Yes, and don't forget, the Spear Method is out in all good bookstores. I think I've seen it on Amazon. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe. We're on Google, Amazon, Apple, Google, Apple, wherever you find podcasts. That's where we are. Thanks a lot.